The Galactic Council chamber was silent, so silent that the buzz of the security drones in the ceiling sounded like thunder. Delegates from over 200 species sat frozen, eyes locked on the giant screen at the front of the room. The image showed a lone human walking through a heavily restricted hallway toward the forbidden chamber, the place where the Drolnox was kept. The Drolnox was not just any predator. It was the most feared creature in the known galaxy, a living weapon taller than a shuttle, faster than light, on foot, immune to psychic control, and allergic to all sedatives. It had slaughtered entire planetary squads in the trials of Sector Zulu. Its roars alone had driven telepathic species into seizures, and now this human, Jack, as the council recalled, was walking straight toward it. With no armor, no weapons, no translator bot. He wasn't even running. He walked with calm, like he was strolling through a park, not facing a monster. Every species was thinking the same thing. The human was about to die, horrifically broadcasted live across the Galactic Alliance Council chambers for all to witness. The Chancellor, a blue-skinned being with 6 floating eyes, leaned forward and whispered to the delegate beside him, "Is this a human death ritual, a challenge of honor?" The delegate, a feathered being from the Zentari system, simply shook his head. "I don't know. They're unpredictable." Unpredictable was the word many used for humans ever since their species joined the Galactic Council 5 solar cycles ago. They had defied expectations, survived death world environments without gear, lifted machines 3 times their weight, and once drank acidic broth as a joke. But this was madness. Jack stepped through the final biometric scan, and the chamber doors hissed open. A low growl erupted from the dark chamber, followed by the heavy sound of footsteps. The Drolnox emerged, eyes glowing red, mouth dripping with thick venom. Its skin shimmered like obsidian swords. It was bigger than any image had suggested, 10 meters tall, with claws the size of speeder bikes. It locked eyes on Jack, and the room went breathless. The beast lowered its head, lips peeled back, exposing jagged rows of teeth. It inhaled. Jack stepped forward without flinching, raised his hand, and then did the unthinkable. He said, "Hey girl, you remember me, huh?" and reached out and petted the Drolnox between the eyes. The galaxy collectively gasped. Monitors flickered. Council members stood. Some fainted. One ambassador from the shrieking species screamed and fell out of his seat. The Drolnox purred, not a growl, not a threat, a purr like a giant feline, and it leaned into Jack's hand, lowering its massive head against his chest. Jack rubbed behind its ears like it was a house pet, and the creature's red eyes slowly blinked with satisfaction. Cameras zoomed in. No control collar, no neuro implants, no force field around Jack, just flesh and touch and bond. For a long moment, no one spoke, no one moved. Then chaos erupted in the council chamber. Shouting, accusations, demands for explanation, warnings that this was a trick, that the human had used forbidden technology. Jack just smiled and said, "She saved me once, now I'm just saying thank you." He turned his back on the Drolnox and walked calmly out of the chamber. The beast followed slowly like a loyal hound, each of its steps shaking the ground. But it never bared its fangs, never growled again. Security bots swarmed the hallway but didn't fire. Even the machines were confused. What was happening? How could a human touch a creature that incinerated ships with its breath, that tore through energy shields like paper? And why did the creature obey him? Not just obey, but adore him. A scientist from the Argolon species spoke from her balcony seat, her voice trembling. "I must see his neural pattern. It's impossible. This violates all predator bonding theories." Another general barked, "This is a threat to galactic security. Humans must be contained before they weaponize this bond." The Chancellor called for silence, but no one listened. Everyone had theories, but no answers except Jack. Jack said nothing more. He simply knelt beside the Drolnox in the open courtyard, just outside the council, and it curled around him, massive armored tail wrapping protectively like a living fortress. Jack looked up into the sky and whispered something that no mic picked up, but the Drolnox reacted. It made a soft cooing sound and closed its eyes. Every being watching felt something strange, not fear, not anger, but awe. How was this possible? What did the human do to change the galaxy's deadliest predator into a calm creature, and most terrifying of all, what else were humans capable of changing? If this was just the beginning, then the galaxy was not prepared for what humanity could become. With Jungle Moon of Viridian 7 was a place no species willingly explored. It was covered in toxic mists, twisting vines, and predators that had never been catalogued. Jack was not supposed to be there. He was part of a research team orbiting the planet when their shuttle malfunctioned and crash-landed deep within the canopy. His team was scattered and communications were down. With a broken leg and no weapons, Jack crawled into a hollow tree trunk to wait for death. Night came quickly and brought sounds that shook his bones. Hissing growls and screeches echoed from all directions. He was sure something would find him, something would end him. He could barely breathe. but he clutched a small knife in his hand, as if that would do anything against the monsters out there. The second night was worse. Hunger blurred his vision and his lips cracked from thirst. Then it came a rustle, a low grunt, heavy steps padding toward him. Jack froze, his eyes locked on the dark opening in front of him. Something massive moved just outside, something breathing heavily. He raised the knife, though his fingers trembled. A shape appeared in the mist, not a full-grown beast, but a youngling, a Dralnox cub. Its eyes glowed dim red like twin embers, its mouth open, showing tiny but sharp fangs. Jack expected a lunge, expected death. Instead, the cub stopped and tilted its head. Curious, it stepped closer, sniffed him. Jack remained still. Blood from his leg had soaked into the ground. The cub made a soft chirp, a strange, almost gentle sound. And then, to Jack's utter disbelief, it lay down next to him, just like that. Not hostile, not hungry, just tired, maybe even cold. Jack barely moved, but he could feel the heat from the cub. Its body radiated warmth that eased his shaking bones. Slowly he reached out and touched its fur, expecting teeth in his neck, but the cub didn't react. It merely closed its eyes and breathed slowly. The jungle noises faded as Jack slipped into unconsciousness in the warmth of a creature that should have killed him. By morning, Jack woke still alive, the cub still beside him. He knew he needed water, knew he had to move or die, but his leg was swollen and useless. He looked at the cub and whispered, "You're not gonna eat me, are you?" The creature blinked slowly and stood. It nudged him gently with its nose, then turned and walked a few steps away before looking back. Jack grunted and dragged himself forward, following it through the brush and roots. Every step was agony, but the cub waited for him, led him to a stream of clear water. Jack drank with his whole face submerged, then collapsed. Again the cub lay beside him. Again this continued for days. The creature brought him food, small creatures from the trees. It shared its warmth and even chased off other threats. When Jack finally built a signal beacon using shattered comm pieces, the cub watched curiously, but never strayed far. When the rescue ship arrived and found Jack surrounded by broken vines and giant predator prints, the crew couldn't believe he was alive. They scanned the area, but the cub had vanished, melted into the jungle. Jack never spoke of it, not to the medics, not to command. He feared they wouldn't believe him, or worse, they would return to hunt it. But deep down he knew the truth. He had bonded with something no one had ever survived before, something pure, something ancient, something terrifying, but gentle in its own way. He returned to Earth, but the memory haunted him, the feeling of those warm eyes, the sound of that purring breath. Years later, when the Galactic Council captured a full-grown Dralnox and imprisoned it in the capital security zone, Jack knew it was her. He recognized the eyes, the way she paced the cell, the faint scar above her right shoulder from a thorn bush she had charged through while protecting him. She remembered to the first time she saw him in the observation window. She did not roar or snarl. She sat and stared, unblinking. The council studied her, tested her, even tried to break her. Nothing worked. No sedative held, no device read her brain, until one day Jack requested to enter the chamber. They denied him at first, said it was suicide, but he insisted, begged. Eventually they allowed it with full security. He entered alone, and she approached, slow, deliberate, the room silent and waiting for a scream. Instead he said, "Hey girl." Long time hush. He sniffed the air, leaned down and let him touch her again. And that moment, that act of impossible connection, changed everything. Now, as the council demanded answers, Jack prepared to speak, but he knew they wouldn't understand, because what he shared with the beast was not science, not programming, not power. It was trust earned in blood and fear and silence under alien stars. And it was stronger than anything the galaxy could explain. Alarm screamed across the upper rings of the council station as news spread that the Dralnox had followed the human into open grounds. Council guards scrambled in every direction, unsure whether to attack or stand down. Jack walked slowly across the central plaza, his boots echoing on the polished stone, while the enormous creature padded behind him with quiet steps. Its claws left deep gouges in the ground, but the beast showed no signs of aggression, only alertness, calmness, loyalty. Cameras floated above, broadcasting the impossible scene to billions across the system, some watching from warships, some from peaceful gardens, and some from underground bunkers where they had once fled from this very predator. The sight sparked chaos in ways no one predicted. Across the galaxy, different factions reacted with fury, shock, and awe. Military commanders demanded answers, claiming that humanity had hidden a secret weapon. Diplomats questioned how long the humans had been training such monsters and whether this display was a threat cloaked in affection. On the diplomatic channel, General Crozer of the Gurnik Empire roared into the feed, "This is not bonding, this is conquest in disguise. We must detain the human before this spreads. He is a danger to all." Council unity was crumbling in hours. Jack was summoned into emergency deliberation chambers. where voices shouted over one another, calling for trials, calling for exile, calling for war. The Drolnox was separated from Jack, placed back into containment, but the beast howled with such pain that the walls of the council shook. Some delegates dropped to their knees, with blood dripping from their ears. Psychic races fainted, others panicked and ran for escape shuttles. Meanwhile, Jack sat still in his chair, not speaking until they quieted. Then he stood and looked at the gathered species and asked a single question: if you found love in a monster, would you call it a weapon? The room fell silent again, not because of the words, but because none of them could understand what he meant. Love was not a word used in these chambers. War Strategy Alliance, those were familiar, but love was far and unpredictable, dangerous. An elder from the luminous kind, who existed as floating crystals, spoke softly. Your kind is reckless. You embrace chaos and call it freedom. Your emotions are storms, and your instincts terrifyingly sincere. But perhaps that is what scares us most. Jack said nothing more, just bowed and walked out, though dozens of species now whispered behind his back, some with envy, some with fear. Outside the chamber, a crowd of alien citizens had gathered, separated by force fields and guards. They had seen the footage, seen Jack touch the Drolnox and live, and now they stared at him not as an intruder, but as something else, something rare, a child from the Avran species. A feathered avian race held up a small sign in galactic common that read, "Can you teach us?" Jack froze, then smiled gently, but he did not answer because he did not know how to teach what had never been learned. Even now he felt the pull, the sense that the beast was crying, calling, longing for him, not with words, but with something deeper, a bond that defied biology and logic, a connection made in the dirt of an alien jungle where blood had dried and fear had passed through them both. The council eventually declared that Jack would remain under observation, not imprisonment, but restricted movement. They wanted to study him, study the connection. Security teams were deployed and cameras followed him everywhere. But it didn't matter, the people had seen enough. Even those who hated humans now watched with fascination. Predators across multiple planets began behaving strangely. One Drolnox in a prison colony stopped attacking and began scratching symbols on the wall, one that looked eerily like a human hand. An aquatic nightmare beast in the Triton systems that had never shown emotion now wept when human music was played. Scientists were baffled. Theories poured in. Some claimed that humans emitted a subconscious empathy field, others said it was evolutionary mimicry, but no one could agree except on one point. Something was changing, something fundamental, and it all began with a human who knelt beside a monster and gave it kindness as if it were never a monster at all. And far in the shadows of a dark moon, others watched, not council members, not citizens, but ancient beings long dormant. They watched the human with eyes that had not blinked in centuries and whispered in tongues forgotten even by time. They have awakened one, they murmured. The path has opened, the bond will grow, and the stars will never be the same again. Deep within the high-security labs of the council, a being named Varlin prepared his instruments with steady clawed hands. Varlin was one of the most respected xenobiologists in the galaxy, known for his cold logic and deep hatred of what he considered chaotic species. And at the top of that list were humans. He had long warned that humanity posed a threat, not because of their technology or strength, but because of their unpredictability. He believed they were a mutation in the cosmic order, an anomaly that could not be calculated, and now Jack had proven him right, or so Varlin thought. He believed Jack had used forbidden neural tech, a hidden implant, something that controlled the Drolnox like a puppet, because in Varlin's mind, there could be no other explanation for such behavior. Empathy was not in his equations, only manipulation and dominance. The Drolnox had been transferred to his lab in a reinforced containment sphere suspended in zero field locks. It watched everything with glowing eyes, unmoving, silent, powerful. Varlin stood before it, his voice calm as he addressed his team. We will find the device, we will expose the lie. The humans think they can seduce predators and call it progress, but what they truly want is to make beasts kneel. But as he spoke, the Drolnox blinked slowly and turned its gaze directly toward him, and in that moment Varlin felt something strange. A pressure in his chest, a sudden warmth. He dismissed it as nerves, but it lingered for hours. Meanwhile, Jack sat in his assigned quarters under constant surveillance. He refused food, he spoke little, but when a screen played the Drolnox pacing in its containment sphere, he pressed his hand against the image as if reaching through the screen. And across the room in the lab, the Drolnox paused, turned its head and pressed its massive clawed paw against the glass wall as if it had heard him, as if it felt him. Varlin saw this and demanded full scans. His machines hummed and glowed and recorded every wavelength, neural impulse, pheromonal discharge, and biochemical reaction. But what they found disturbed him. There were no implants, no mechanical control. No genetic manipulation, instead the brain activity of the Drolnox. When Jack appeared showed something else, something never before recorded in the species. A pattern that mirrored human emotional bonding, a rhythmic echo that looked like what humans called trust. But not just trust, more than that, something closer to familial imprinting. Even Love Varlin rejected the data, forced reruns, adjusted variables, and replaced equipment, but the results did not change every time Jack was near, or even mentioned. The Drolnox displayed a pattern of calm obedience and protection. When Jack disappeared from view, stress levels rose, heart rate spiked, and the beast growled low, not with rage, but with longing. Varlin stepped back from the console, stared at the numbers, and for the first time in his long career felt uncertainty. Perhaps it was not control, perhaps it was not manipulation, perhaps it was something. Humans truly possessed a gift no algorithm could replicate, and for Varlin, who lived in equations and control, that idea was terrifying. He initiated a private experiment without council permission. He allowed Jack to enter a controlled observation chamber separated from the Drolnox only by a single energy barrier. No weapons, no guards, only silent watchers and breath held. Jack stepped inside and stood before the beast, who instantly lowered her head and made the soft rumbling sound like thunder. Wrapped in silk, Jack smiled and said, "Missed you, girl. I know this place sucks, but I'm here okay." And the Drolnox let out a breath that fogged the glass barrier, lay down and pressed her head against it. Jack mirrored the motion, touching the barrier as if it were skin and not energy. Varlin watched the sensors. They lit up in ways his mind could not process, to beings of different worlds, sensing without force, without threat. The data was undeniable. This was not tech, this was not science, this was something deeper, something older, something the galaxy had long forgotten, or maybe never knew. And Varlin sat down, defeated and fascinated all at once. As the council viewed his findings, silence filled the room again. Some still whispered of danger, of what ifs, but others stared at the graphs and the images of predator and man breathing together in perfect unison. One young delegate whispered, "This is impossible." And another replied, "Or maybe we have always misunderstood what possible means." And far beyond the station, in quiet corners of the galaxy, beasts, stirred creatures long feared, lifted their heads and looked to the stars. Something had shifted, and they felt it in their blood and bone, a call, a presence. The bond had begun to ripple outward, carried by a human who offered no chains, only kindness, and a beast that had once known only rage but now knew something more. And in that knowing, everything began to change. With moonlight over the council complex shimmered silver across the high towers, while shadows crept along its edges. In one of those shadows, a group moved, silent, fast, coordinated, cloaked in tech designed to hide them from sensors. Their goal was clear: eliminate the human who had bonded with the predator. Before the idea spread, before the old order crumbled, their leader, a pale-scaled warrior from the Calder Syndicate, whispered into his calms, "This creature is a weapon, and the human is its trigger. We end both tonight." They breached the first layer of security, then the second, slipping past guards with precision. Jack sat in his temporary quarters, unaware, his eyes closed as he leaned against the transparent wall, staring out into the stars far below. In her holding dome, the Drolnox stirred. Something felt wrong, a pulse, a vibration through the walls and steel and wires, not sound, not scent, something primal, something only she could feel. The moment the assassins reached the third layer, her eyes snapped open, claws scraped against the floor. Her body tensed, and with a single strike she shattered the reinforced wall. Alarms blared, red lights flashed across the entire station as the Drolnox stormed upward, tail smashing through corridors. Her roars shook oxygen lines, burst lights flickered, and bulkheads slammed shut. Security systems scrambled, failing to predict her movements. She reached the outer door of Jack's quarters just as the first blade cut through the wall. Jack stood confused, heart pounding but unmoving, when the Drolnox burst in, her body glowing with fury, teeth bared, claws dripping with instinct. She saw the threat and moved with terrifying grace. Her first swipe knocked two assassins into the wall, the second shattered their cover, and before any could react, she was in the center of them, not attacking wildly, but protecting Jack's body with her own. Each time a weapon was drawn, her claws were faster. Each time a flash of death aimed for Jack, her body absorbed the blow. One intruder fired a pulse directly at Jack, but the Drolnox leapt in front of him. The blast struck her side and burned deep, and she screamed a scream that broke glass across for decks. Jack rushed to her, hands trembling as he pressed against her, wound, "Stay with me, stay with me, girl." And she looked into his eyes, not with pain, but with something else, something steady. The final assassin raised a blade, but Jack turned, eyes blazing, and shouted, "Stop!" And to everyone's shock, the assassin froze, not by command, but by fear. In that voice was no human weakness, only something ancient, something that made even killers stop. Then the guards arrived, tackled the assassin, subdued the scene. But their eyes never left Jack or the bleeding creature beside him. Council medics rushed in, unsure whether to sedate or restrain, but Jack growled, "If you touch her wrong, I will make sure every being sees what you really fear." And they hesitated. They listened, they obeyed. The Drolnox, despite her wounds, refused to leave Jack's side. Her massive body curled around him. Even in pain, her eyes stayed open, focused on his every breath. Cameras recorded every second. The footage leaked to the galaxy, and what they saw was not a beast rampaging, but a protector fighting for her, human fighting with purpose and care and something more. As the Drolnox healed slowly over days, Jack never left her side. He fed her by hand, cleaned her wounds, whispered to her, sang in quiet broken notes. And in every corner of every system, beings watched, cried, debated, fought, and changed, because they saw something impossible, real and raw and undeniable, that the deadliest predator in the galaxy had not just spared a human, but had taken a mortal wand to protect him. The council could not bury it. The people would not let them. Every screen, every feed, every voice called for answers, called for understanding, and some for hope, because if such a creature could love, then maybe nothing was truly beyond redemption. And in the coldest parts of space, ancient species who once ruled in silence stirred. They saw this bond, this flame, and whispered through the void, "The moment has come." And as Jack held the Drolnox paw and she breathed steady under alien lights, the stars above flickered, like they too were waiting for what came next. Council chamber filled with attention that weighed heavier than gravity. Every delegate, every commander, every scholar, and every citizen tuned in across the galaxy waited for Jack to speak. The footage of the Drolnox shielding him had broken the walls of disbelief. No longer did the council ask if the bond was real now. They demanded to know how it was possible. Jack stood before them, not in armor, not in ceremony, just simple clothes, torn, stained, and honest. His voice was calm, but filled with a quiet fire. "I know what you all saw. I know what you fear, but this is not about fear. This is about what you forgot." He raised a hand, and the chamber dimmed. A screen lit behind him. Images from Earth appeared, old videos, grainy footage, black and white, of humans walking beside lions, of children laughing with wolves, of elephants lowering heads to be kissed by tiny hands. The room was silent. Jack continued, "This is not a trick. This is not domination on our world. We did not always conquer the wild. Sometimes we listened, sometimes we walked alongside it. Not every time, not always with peace, but when we got it right, it was beautiful. And they remembered us, not because we forced them, but because we cared. And they cared back." He paused, his eyes scanning faces of disbelief, confusion, and quiet awe. "The Drolnox is not a weapon. She is a being with thoughts, emotions, memory. She saved me not because I commanded her, but because she chose to. Because I showed her trust and she gave it back. Do you know what that means?" He pointed at the delegates. "It means everything you believe about apex creatures needs to change. It means that maybe the monsters are not the ones you locked up. Maybe it is the ones who never tried to understand them." Murmurs rose across the seats, some nodding, others stiff. But no one interrupted. Jack stepped forward. "I was not the strongest. I was not the fastest. I was alone, bleeding, terrified. And yet that creature saw something in me, and I saw something in her. Pain, loneliness maybe, but also the will to live, to connect, and that connection saved us both." The screen changed. Again, more images of Earth, pets, service animals, bonds that defied logic and crossed instincts, humans and beasts living not in fear, but in partnership. One delegate, a three-eyed thinker from the Council of Logic, stood slowly, her voice quiet. "I do not understand how you can claim this when your species is so often violent, so often driven by emotion." And Jack smiled, not a mocking smile, but a sad one. "You are right. We are emotional. We make mistakes. We hurt and we heal. But it is those same emotions that let us bond beyond reason, that let us reach out, even when it is terrifying, even when the world says we should run. That is why we can do what others cannot, because we feel deeply and act on it even if it kills us. And that is what she saw in me. Not control, not command, just care." The council began to shift, not in unity, but in reflection. Whispers traveled, debates began. No one stood to argue. Not now, not after what they had seen. The chancellor called a recess and the chamber emptied, but the galaxy did not sleep. Across colonies and stations, discussions lit up. Children asked if they too could meet a Drolnox. Teachers showed them the footage. Elders told stories of times when their people had once known similar bonds and forgotten them. And on the ground floor of the station, beneath the towering halls, the Drolnox rested, her wounds healed, but her eyes never left the upper levels, waiting for Jack. And when he finally came down, she rose, towering, strong but gentle. He reached her and placed his head against hers, and she let out a sound that was not a growl, not a purr, but something new, a tone of contentment, of belonging. And those who watched saw not a beast and a man, but two souls who had met across impossible divides and chosen each other, and far in the ancient edges of the void, where even stars feared to burn, the old watchers stirred fully awake. They saw what had happened, and in their language of light and shadow they marked the human as touched, the Dralnox as guardian, and the bond as sacred. A new path had opened, and none could close it now. Not council, not fear, not even war. The future had changed, because one man had once reached out in the dark and found a claw and held it not with force, but with love, and that love had echoed across galaxies louder than any weapon ever. Forget. The Galactic Council gathered once more, their chamber heavy with expectation, every eye fixed on the vote that would decide the fate of humanity and the bonds they had forged with apex predators. Jack stood at the center, no longer a mere diplomat, but a symbol, a bridge between worlds. He glanced at the Dralnox seated beside him, her massive form coiled in silent vigilance. The room hummed with whispered debates, some arguing for strict regulation, others calling for freedom, for a new era. One delegate, a stoic warrior from the Ivern system, spoke. First, humans have proven unpredictable, dangerous, but also capable of forging bonds others have feared. A power not of weapons, but of trust. She paused, then added, we must decide if that power will be embraced or feared. A young counselor from the Galadri sector stood tall, her voice firm. This is a chance to redefine peace, not through fear, but through connection. To learn from humans their respect and care for what others see as monsters is a lesson many of us have forgotten. Many heads nodded slowly, but opposition remained a massive figure. From the Traxan Empire rose his voice, booming. Predators are weapons, tools of war, to be tamed, not pampered. We cannot risk chaos because one species defied logic. He slammed a fist on the table, and the chamber trembled. Jack listened carefully, then when the murmurs settled he spoke with quiet strength. The Dralnox is proof that trust can tame what violence never could, that bond is a path forward, not a threat. If we close ourselves to it, we close the door on the future. But if we open that door together, we change everything. He looked around the room, his eyes meeting every delegate's gaze, and added, the universe has always feared what it does not understand, but maybe fear is what blinds us, and love is what saves us. As the vote began, the tension was palpable. One by one, the species cast their decision, light after light flickering, green for acceptance, red for rejection. As the last vote was tallied, the chamber fell silent. Then a roar of cheers erupted from those who supported the new path. The Chancellor banged his gavel and declared the vote passed. The galaxy would recognize the bonds between humans and apex predators as legitimate and worthy of protection. Jack stepped forward and extended his hand toward the Dralnox, who gently licked it in return. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jack's thoughts were already beyond the chamber. He thought of the children on distant worlds who would grow up knowing not fear but friendship, with creatures once seen only as threats, of warriors and diplomats who would now seek not conquest, but understanding. The Dralnox nuzzled him softly as he whispered, thank you, girl. The story spread fast across star systems. Alien children began asking their parents if they too could have predator friends. Schools included lessons on empathy and care, and even the fiercest species started showing signs of change. Predators in captivity stopped attacking, and some began responding to human voices like old forgotten songs had been awakened. A new era dawned, not with weapons, but with bonds forged in trust and respect. Far from the council chambers, in a quiet meadow beneath twin moons, Jack sat with the Dralnox, watching stars trace ancient patterns across the sky. She rested her great head on his lap, and he stroked her scales gently. He thought of the journey from the lonely jungle moon to the halls of power, and how one simple act of kindness had shaken the galaxy and changed its course forever. Somewhere deep in the void, old watchers smiled, shadows flickered, and a new chapter began. The universe would never be the same again, because a human had dared to pet the deadliest predator, and in doing so had taught the cosmos that even in the darkest places kindness could grow, and that sometimes the greatest power was not in strength or fear, but in the courage to love. The council chamber hummed with a quiet tension that felt like the calm before a storm. Every being present knew this moment was more than a vote. It was the turning point for the galaxy itself. Jack stood tall, his eyes scanning the room, his hand resting lightly on the Dralnox beside him, her massive head tilted as if she too understood the weight of what was to come. Whispers rippled through the seats, some filled with hope, others with doubt, but all eyes were fixed on the human who had changed everything. The Chancellor rose, his voice steady and clear. This council now decides not just the fate of a species, but the future of unity and trust in our galaxy. The vote began. Lights flickered across the massive panel, each representing a system. One by one, voices echoed the choices made: green for acceptance, red for rejection. As the tally neared completion, a hush fell over the chamber. The final count revealed a historic victory. The majority had embraced the bond between humans and apex predators as a new path forward. Cheers erupted from the supporters while the skeptics remained silent. Yet thoughtful Jack looked down at the Drolnox, who softly nuzzled his hand, their connection unspoken yet undeniable as the crowd rose in applause. A new era dawned, one where fear was replaced with understanding, where strength was measured not by weapons but by trust and compassion. Outside the chamber, citizens across countless worlds watched the historic moment live, some wiping tears, others smiling. Children asked their parents if they too could have a friend like the great Drolnox. Schools began teaching stories of courage, kindness, and unity. Even former enemies started seeking peace, inspired by what they had witnessed in Jack and his companion. Far away beneath twin moons, Jack sat beside the Drolnox, her great form relaxed, yet vigilant. The stars above traced silent patterns in the night sky. He whispered a quiet thank you to the creature who had saved him, and in return, she rested her head on his lap, a bond forged in hardship and love stronger than any force in the universe. And deep in the silent corners of space, ancient watchers who had observed the unfolding saga smiled, their shadows shifting with approval. A new chapter had begun, one where humanity showed the cosmos that even the deadliest predators could be tamed not by fear, but by the gentle touch of trust and love. And so the universe changed forever, because one human dared to reach out and pet the fiercest beast. The end.